Hello, Dr. Steph. We're so happy to have you.
Hi, thank you for having me, Beth. I'm excited to be here.
So this is Women Investor Wednesday. And I think that we've shared this already with you, but just a real quick, about 5 years ago before COVID, I had heard a stat that of all of the investors in commercial real estate, only 3% were women. And of the 3%, half of those were inherited or spouses.
Wow.
So I own a few shopping centers and I realized, oh my gosh, I'm part of a 1.5%, which I thought was deplorable. And I said, I've got to figure out how can I help change that? And I started interviewing my girlfriends saying, and any women that are in my life. And I said, do you invest in commercial real estate? No. Well, why don't you? It's too risky. I go, well, do you invest anywhere? Oh, yes, the stock market. Oh, okay. And then I'd say, well, why else don't you invest? Well, it's too complicated. I go, but you invest in, I said, I lost 80% of my Netflix stock last year, but that's not complicated whatsoever. And then they said, we're afraid. And I'm like, well, what are you afraid of? That is too complicated. So finally, women, after I kept drilling down on them, it really came down to, I don't know any other women doing it. Aha. Well, and that makes sense because of the stat. So I thought, I can fix that. I'm not going to teach people. We're not going to teach people how to do it. That's not what I'm going to do. What I want to do is expose women that there are other women like us that are doing it so that they can then say, our first year we had a virtual conference, 100 women were in attendance. And I interviewed 8 women who were investing in commercial real estate and just exposed the other 92 women. Oh, there's women doing this. And then we've had 3 in-person conferences. And last March, we had 13 women on stage. And Dr. Steph, they represent all different asset classes, self-storage, fix and flips, shopping centers, industrial, senior living. So I get them on stage. I introduce them to the audience. They tell their stories. And then they go into breakout rooms where if the women are interested in that specific asset class, they can go and do a deeper dive. And the women who are doing it share their stories and somewhat teach them. So I'm on a mission now. And then there's women, obviously, that because they have young kids or they have older parents or there's a challenge financially to come to the conference, I said, how can I get people like you and me to the masses? And that's when we decided, let's do Women Investor Wednesday, where I interview women. And so now we have a collection, I think, of about 30 women that I've interviewed, so that if people can't travel to the conferences, they get to see these videos and meet women like you and hear your stories. So that's why we're here.
I love it. Thank you for doing this, Beth. I am passionate about real estate, and it's been an interesting journey. I would say I was first introduced to commercial real estate by my mother when she was about 19, because she had literally just graduated from high school. I was born when she was 18, and she began her real estate career doing land transactions.
Wow.
Exactly.
Can you imagine what the stat was when she was around?
Exactly. And so guess what? She didn't last. She tried to do it and she was traveling. And so she had to pivot from commercial into residential.
Mm-hmm.
And so I learned residential because, of course, that's how we purchased our first home.
Right.
But I remember going on Saturday door knocks and all of those things. And I went on to create my business. It was not in real estate because I was like, well, my mom, I convinced her to go back into real estate, right? And I was like, well, I'll have more money. I'm going to make money. And in my early business, I owned an advertising, marketing, communications company. So I was advising Fortune 500 companies. So I knew I was going to generate a lot of wealth. And I personally liked real estate as an asset class because I had been studying other high net worth individuals and wealthy families. And I noticed within their portfolios, they always have real estate assets. So it's like, duh, that's a no-brainer. Right.
Right. Right.
you know. But what happened tragically was
Hmm.
after my 30th birthday, my mother was 48 at the time, and she took a nap and had a brain aneurysm and died.
Oh,
And
I'm so
that
sorry.
was just devastating for me. But also, what happened was I became pregnant and I gave birth to my son literally on the 1 year anniversary of her passing.
Hmm.
And I bought another piece of property. So at that point, I owned about 3 properties. And believe it or not, trusting the realtor because I was, 7 months pregnant, and he put me in a trip deal that basically caused me to lose everything that I had accumulated at that point.
Oh no.
And I was so devastated by it all that I realized that I had to learn real estate because the real estate wasn't bad. I had done very well in making smart investment decisions. It's just that the other pieces of the funding, kind of all of those pieces, I didn't have enough experience or expertise. So I set it upon myself that I was going to learn real estate, but I didn't want to just learn residential real estate. I wanted to become a real estate developer because I had been advising mayors and cities. So I'll kind of pause there in the event you
Okay.
have an initial reaction.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm so sorry for the loss of your mom, especially suddenly like that, you know. But God works in mysterious ways to then have a baby, right?
Yes.
What a blessing, right? And you mentioned before we got on the recording that you have 2 boys. I have 2 boys. What are the ages of your boys?
So I have a 27-year young son, and then I have a bonus son who's 15.
That's amazing. Yeah. So mine are 23 and 21 today.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent.
So, okay, so you had 3 properties. Were they residential, the ones that you had?
The original properties were residential, and then I bought some more. So it's like over the course, when I look at my personal holdings, I had at one occasion I kind of rebuilt. So I had about 6 different residential properties.
Awesome.
But I got wiped out again.
Wow.
So I have my second wipeout when
Wow.
the financial markets collapsed back in 2010, 2012. I lost that next set of portfolio. And so I'm rebuilding again, but in commercial assets.
So what happened with the when during the global financial, were you overextended? Did you buy too many, like too many loans?
No, no, it's just a very basic situation. I have found myself in financial jeopardy during the periods of times that I've been supposedly on a safe job. That's what I learned is that, when you buy real estate and you buy in certain areas, every time you close on a transaction, your employer verifies your salary and income. And not everyone is always excited to know your personal business and to know that you appear to be progressing. And
Uh-huh.
especially if you're buying good real estate. And so basically what happened is as soon as I closed on escrow, I suddenly, after getting an outstanding performance review the week before, suddenly the next week I was unemployed.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry.
So that happened. So I fought to keep the property as long as I could, going
Mhm.
through new clients. And then I had a developer stiff me for almost $70,000. And it was just not,
Mm.
anything that I could really rebound from, with the fact that I had to quickly launch a company and, tap into all of the
Wow.
resources that I had available a week after I closed, escrow, where
Wow.
everybody expects to
Well,
lose their money, a week later.
absolutely. So this is great content for your Dr. Money Live TV show, right?
Well, not only that, yeah, exactly. But it's what I realized was that because I had been successful as an entrepreneur, um, you know, that when you still go into corporate environments, and you try to fly below the radar, it's just impossible. Like my rule now is that everything else that I buy, I won't have to have a third party verify my income. It'll be something that I own where I'm verifying, my own salary through my own organization,
Right.
because I'm not going to fire me.
Right. Exactly. You're safe. That's definitely a safe employment. Okay.
Especially when I'm doing outstanding work. That's the part that's the oxymoron. How do I get an outstanding performance review the week before? But the only thing that changed a week later is that I closed escrow on a property.
Do you think they were just jealous?
I know they were just jealous.
Oh, how sad. Very sad. Okay. But you started to rebuild now and
Yeah.
in commercial. So can you tell us about your first commercial deal that you purchased?
So I'm right now, I have 8 properties in escrow, and I'm raising $100 million. Basically, my development company is I'm launching wellness resorts around the world. I have 8 boutique hotels that I'm buying, as well as a honey farm in London. And then I have another 20 transactions behind that are lined up. So I have another 8 to 10 locations on the continent of Africa. I'm on my way to Ivory Coast and Senegal. We
Wow.
have Ghana, Uganda, Nigeria, Kenya, Sierra Leone, Swaziland, Ethiopia, all as prospective locations. I have a site in Cyprus. I have 3 sites in Italy that I'm working on, a site in France, and my first 8 locations in Jamaica are what I'm looking to close this year.
Wow. Okay. So let's talk about those. So 8, and these are boutique hotel or wellness resorts, you
Well,
said.
they're boutique hotels, and
Okay.
once I acquired them, I will be flipping them into our brands. I have 3 different flags for different class categories. So, like my 420 wellness brands are considered similar to like your W hotels in the US.
Okay.
I have another brand, Amani Haba, that would be considerable to Four Seasons Hotel. And
Mhm.
then my ultra luxury brand is called Turquoise. And that would be similar to your St. Regis or a Ritz Carlton type property.
That's amazing. So how did you go from advertising to residential portfolio, sad endings to wellness resorts?
So what happened was, and thank you for that question, because there was a transition. So while I was still the CEO of the advertising agency, and I mentioned that I was advising mayors, there were some of my colleagues that knew that I was noticing that every time I provided a strategic plan for a city, that developers seemed to make money. And I was trying to figure out, well, how are they making money off of what it is that I am recommending? So I'd already was curious. I was just trying to figure out how they made their money. I needed to understand their model. So it was right around this time that I was, going through the devastation that I got accepted into USC's program for real estate finance and development. And they were putting together this program aimed at finding diverse entrepreneurs. So I was a great candidate for them because I had had success. In my ad agency, I had done a $250 million deal. So at the time, I had what was considered the largest Black multicultural agency in the world. So we
Wow.
were, $250 million back firm, 8 offices, 400 employees. So I was at a decent scale. And at that time, I was hoping to build that into a $1 billion organization. But I was burning out on advertising too. So there was, a little bit of, I didn't expect to get that far that early in my career. And then I was like, I don't want to spend the rest of my life doing this. Right. So I was USC. And when I was coming out of the program, we had an opportunity to meet several, guests and supporters of the program. And one guy in particular, he hosted our dinner group. And he mentioned that he had an opportunity for a project manager to join his team. And so USC, of course, was pushing me as the poster child for the new entrepreneur. And I was like, I'm a little burnout in making payroll. And, I've got this new baby. My baby's only, I think he was about 3 at the time. I said, I think I'd rather be an executive, get a steady salary, gain the experience, and then be poised to launch my company later. And so that's what I did. But what I didn't know was I jumped into a company that had been about 20 years in the business, and we were building. And so we ended up having the largest privately held REIT in the nation, over 99,000 doors. We
Wow.
built luxury apartments. And we then sold that portfolio to Aimco. which is where we made $3.5 billion for that company. But my first 90 days on the job, I saved $1 million cost overrun and became a rock star in
What a
that.
great experience. Right out of school, right?
Jumped right in. It was just a 2-week intensive program. It was like their master's program on steroids at
Wow.
USC. So we had to live on campus for those 2 weeks, and then we had to hit the ground running after that. And so, I jumped right in, hit the ground running, and the rest has become the legacy. So between that portfolio, I've controlled, billions and billions of dollars. And so our last project that we were completing was in Westwood. It's a mixed use development. So we're going back to mixed use. But I noticed that because, again, developers typically are segmented by an area of expertise. So whatever you do as your calling card initially is sort of how your business becomes identified. But more importantly, it's how you gain your financing. And so we were apartment luxury developers. So to do a mixed use, typically we knew how to do the apartments well, but the retail component was done on spec, and those numbers were zeroed out. And so that's so I left the company. I had an opportunity to join another organization that specialized on the retail part of that, because I wanted to know both sides of the numbers. And so I ended up doing a few deals where we bought underperforming apartments, and then I flipped those into condo in Las Vegas and in Henderson, Nevada. That's how I became familiar with working in that market. And then I had another portfolio of about 14 small lot projects. And then I got an opportunity to work with a company that specialized in retail centers. So they bought underperforming strip centers. And what we were doing is we had 5 key markets that I was in the process of subdividing the airspace and going to then create condos and create pedestrian friendly environments. So I'm a master of the entitlement and design process and all of that stuff. So I'm a developer, basically, at my core. And so in that situation, we were raising a fund, and about 2012 is when the markets just completely catapulted. So we weren't able to close on that fund, and that company ended up, kind of ultimately dissolving. They went from being about 1,000 people organization to down about 10 people by the time they allocated and got rid of the staffing and how they were running their business, just so that they could be lean and mean enough to survive. But that was kind of all along this journey. And so it was around that point that I realized that not only did I have certain asset class knowledge, but that I also wanted to diversify, because when I was looking at the demographics, that you had the boomers aging. And so I was looking at what would be the asset classes that would give me, again, another opportunity in terms of my experience. And that was either going to be hospitality or medical. And I had advised companies like, or again, early on, I was on the team for the Claremont Resort Hotel, which is a luxury hotel up in the Bay Area, which is where I'm from. And I was on the marketing team when they had decided to invest in this new thing called a spa. Before that became ubiquitous across properties, they invested $1 million. So I remembered that. And then I went on to be a consultant to Hyatt Regency, Park Oakland, and several other. And then my agency, we also had Cedars-Sinai was a client, the California State Department of Health Services. So I knew something about kind of this health side of the bucket, but I didn't want to do hospitals, because to me, they are not places that I want to be. So that's when I started creating my whole idea behind this Medi-Spa-Tel and what a Medi-Spa-Tel would be. So I created my own asset class.
That's cool. That's amazing. Have you ever met a woman by the name of Tracy Prigmore?
I have not.
So Tracy invests in hotels,
Okay.
like Marriott's.
Okay.
Like
She
that.
would love me then, because that's what we see ourselves as, basically becoming the Marriott for wellness.
Okay. So, and she has a hospitality program where she teaches women how to buy hotels, both female college students and working women that she calls, I think, careerists. And
Okay.
it's her that it's she teaches, it's like an 8-week program, and then at the end they do a pitch, and the winning team, it's usually 2 or 3 women in a group, get $50,000 from her fund to seed a project. And I've been a judge. So it's called She Has a Deal, SHAD, She Has a Deal. And it's in right outside of Washington, D.C., like I think Baltimore. And I've been a judge 2 of the last 4 years, I think, of the event. So you should definitely check her out, because you all have a love and, you know, an attachment to the hospitality. So I invest in her fund that helps seed these women, you know, the competition prizes for these women. But Tracy's amazing. And they just bought, her and her partner, and they raised money, and they bought a vineyard and a winery in somewhere, not in Napa, but in California, maybe an hour out of Napa.
Yes, several of those have come up, and the only reason that I'm not executing my US play just yet is because of the advantages that I created with my Jamaica play. So it was really, while we were locked down for COVID, I was finishing up law school, and
Oh my
my
goodness.
office was closed in Newport Beach. So I thought, well, rather than, I just relocated actually to Nevada. I was between California and Nevada. I was going to build a casino here. So a group had raised $3.5 billion for me to do that project. But I also gave myself an out, because I knew that all the years I had done business here, that I wasn't really into casinos. So I kind of said, I'll look at the deal, I'll evaluate the deal, and I'll determine if the deal works for me, knowing that if this is going to be my legacy, what I'm creating at this point, because now my son is 27, and, you know, and then my bonus son, you know, that I'd be at a place to go forward, you know, back into, if you will, building that billion-dollar company that I left off building when my mother passed. I wanted to do what I loved. And so I did evaluate the casino deal and said that it just didn't make sense for me. I don't see why they would spend $3.5 billion for a solo place. It just didn't make sense. So the lead investor was a little bit surprised, but he called me 6 months later and said, I don't care what it is you're doing, I'm going to invest in whatever it is you're doing next, because you're a brilliant CEO. Because turns out, of course, COVID hit and everything, and it looked like, oh my God, she's
Wow.
brilliant. And I'm like, you know, I'm just saying, I understand that that's what I was. I was a strategist. I was solving business problems, you know, for the first 15 to 20 years of my life. And so because of those fundamentals, when I look at real estate and opportunities, I understand the totality of the markets, migration patterns, you know, the capital structures and all of those things. And so I'm able to quickly, and that's what happened is I had been studying Jamaica for about 30 years, but I really hadn't spent concentrated time there. And what COVID allowed me to do was I ended up spending 3 months straight. And one, I wasn't sure, you know, if I would, you know, manage. I ended up spending most of the last 2 years of law school there, every quarter, like flying back and forth. I
Wow.
know Jamaica better than I know Nevada as a result.
Wow. That's great. That's
But
great.
the way that I was able to underwrite those assets and find opportunities, had I not had that opportunity, I would not have been able to underwrite under the circumstances. Because if I had to rely upon traditional US debt funding strategies, you can't underwrite the acquisitions the same way, because they don't have all the financial records to support the sales price.
So are you buying 8 existing hotels, or are they pieces of land that you're developing
These
buildings?
operating businesses. My first phase is so basically what I looked at is, when I do a ground up construction, my smallest project is about $150 million project. But then also it takes the lead time on my development, depending upon where that site would be. I wanted to be able to produce returns for my early investors and have them be very happy and in love with me. So I figured out a way to make everybody money faster, you know, like 3 years faster. So literally, as I acquire each property and reposition it for my flag, it's 60 to 90 days to flip the property. And because of that, the model ends up turning those properties into 8 to 10x in top line revenues.
Mm.
So it's
So,
a
so you're buying so you have 8 existing hotels under contract currently.
yes.
And are you closing them all at the same time?
So my we kind of have them staggered just because of
Got
the
it.
fact of the matter that there's all the legal work that goes into play. So I kind of have 2 at a time, but they're scheduled to be sequential closing. And now I'm starting to pre-sell the wellness week. So what we do is we deliver wellness a week at a time. And so you go for a destination wellness experience. And so think of like going on a cruise. Instead of going RevPAR daily, we book a week at a time. So that changes the model significantly. Also, it allows us to require fewer bookings because it's a fixed period of
Right.
time, but
Right.
it also allows us to deliver on the wellness outcomes that we like for our guests to experience. And so far, the early testers, within their first 24 hours on the island, they're already trying to rebook. So we're feeling
Amazing. So
happy.
are you an operator even though you don't own them yet?
So sort of, because again, what I built was really strong relationships with many of these operators. And because of, I guess, my approach, what I found was that I became the preferred buyer. A couple of operators reached out to me directly and said, I know you may not know that we want to sell, but if you're ever interested in buy, even before I said that I was interested in buying, they came to me and said,
That's
we
great.
really would love to sell our property to you.
Awesome.
And so I said, well, let me see if I can make the numbers work. And, I figured out a way to make my model work so that the deal makes sense.
So
And
how much is on an average of the 8? What's the purchase price of on average of each of like across the board? Is it a
so,
million per property? Is it 3
no, each
million per
property
property?
is about right under 5 million a property.
Okay. And how does financing work in Jamaica? Are you just raising money and you're buying it without a loan, or do you get a loan, or because it's an operating property, can you do SBAs in Jamaica?
No, 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 no. None of those things. That's what I was saying early on, is that
Okay.
I had to underwrite the properties because I was there, and I understood. I learned about each of the properties and the sellers before I even was prepared to make offers.
Yeah.
So the lead investor that reached out to me from the casino 6 months later asked me, he says, well, I want to invest in whatever you want to do. And I told him 2 things. I said, here's 2 things. One, I'm not dropping out of law school. So I'm not going to raise capital until I graduate from law school. I'm just not, because I can't execute doing 80 hours a week of law school and just, staying afloat.
Mhm.
It's too much.
Right.
So number 2, but what I will do is I will underwrite the properties. And I said, because I'm going to have a fund, and the fund is going to have to be based on my business model, not on the revenues from the properties, because the revenues will not substantiate on surface that type of underwriting protocol. Only someone like myself could create the business opportunity and underwrite it to such a way that it makes sense and it's a favorable investment. Right. But that's my
Okay.
IP
Right.
added into a situation to now create that value
So
that does.
you raised a fund based on the
Yes.
business model, not the real estate.
Yes, but it's backed by the real estate. So
Got
the
it.
fund, it's in and of itself, the value of that real estate will absolutely support that. And so, yes, in Jamaica, if after I closed, I wanted to add debt to those properties, I absolutely could. But
Right.
I have a bigger strategy, and that is I'm going to, assemble all of these, and I'm probably going to go public in Jamaica in about 3 years because the stock market is doing very well there. And there's some strategic advantages to being a publicly operated organization in that region of the world that I'm
Wow.
exploring. family. But I have some great, for investors, again, this is like, yeah, you get an opportunity. I met some people a few weeks ago, and it was saying just what you're saying about this, that, oh my God, it's so amazing to know you. And especially when they realized the organization that I cut my teeth with and what I did, they were like, oh my God, no wonder they kept you a secret. You're helping. I'm like, exactly. I was making billions of dollars for everybody else. I just decided that I want to make some of those dollars for my own family and create
Absolutely.
a
Grow
legacy.
your own family's wealth.
Right? Why not? Right?
And oh, by the way, go to law school.
Oh yeah,
Also.
right. Exactly. Finish that part too. So, I'm in a great place, and I feel so honored and, grateful to be at this place where, again, like I said, I'm working with a coach. So I got a coach to assist me with this first part of the raise. We've kind of targeted to do it in tranches, but have a rolling raise so that I can do 5 to 10 million at a time, and just keep them rolling in. And they can be designated, for each individual asset, or they could be part of the total fund. And then I have a nice IP portfolio. So when you start talking about, the elements that began to make the company really valuable, we had a preliminary that kind of said, well, based on what you're looking to do, by the time you kind of close on this first 8, and when we roll forward, we're looking at a unicorn. No,
Mhm.
no fluff, because
Yeah.
we are occupying 2 spaces. We're in the wellness, but we also are in organic farming.
Oh,
And so our
of
properties are
course.
located either on an organic farm, or a beachfront location, which the locations also complement how close we are in proximity to our farming, which then feeds our guests.
Right.
So, it's a holistic
Wow.
approach to their wellness. So then when they go home, they're going to want to continue to subscribe to not only our med tech tools that we have for home use, but most importantly, our meal kits and our tinctures and tonics that they've used for different to address different, elements, if they need a detox. So on the mind side, we feature thought leadership. So we have different thought leaders that are talking about, healing from emotional trauma or different things, because
Right.
there's a bunch of folks that occupy that space. On the body, we focus on gut health. So
Right.
we know that once we detox and get your gut rebalanced, and then on soul is where we create this real community, because I believe that we all have ancestral assignments. And when you're feeling your best and you're thinking your best, then you're able to be present to what those assignments are, right? And so you're able to execute. And if you have a tribe of like minded individuals, so what I envision is that people will be traveling around the world to our various locations and planning dates and planning family reunions, and corporations will be sending their top executives, and real estate investors like yourself and groups you'll host your conferences at our properties, because why not? Why not go a place to be fed mentally and know that your body is going to be healed? No.
So I travel with a group of women. This year will be, I think, our 12th or 13th trip. And one year we went to Miraval,
Okay.
which is, feeding the soul. They have the garden, they have you know, it sounds, I think you're on the right track. Miraval is sold out. Now they're starting to expand. I think they opened, the one we went to was in Tucson, but now they have one in Austin. And some of the ladies that were on the Miraval trip said, oh, this reminds me of Canyon Ranch. So, but they're all very much in demand, very costly. So I think I love that.
It's investing in your wellness.
Right.
Aren't you the most expensive, I'm
For,
sorry,
for
engine?
sure. For
You know?
sure. But the good thing is, like, there's a demand for what you're creating, because
Yes.
there's, I don't think there's more than 3 or 4 Canyon Ranches and 2 Miravals. So the fact that they're all sold out months and months in advance, you rolling out this flag of these multiple, these 3 levels, I think, you're definitely onto something. Everyone wants to take care of their gut health. They want to take care of their mindset, all of these things. It's great. And then they can do it internationally.
Yes, 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 yes.
So
Yeah,
so what would you say and then we'll then think about how, can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more. But
absolutely.
what would you say to the women that maybe, are in strategy, or they work in real estate, or they have ideas, they want to be a developer, an investor, raising funds, buying properties? What's your advice to the women that, are on the sidelines right now?
Absolutely. So I think it's important to learn about the asset classes that you think are really of interest. And that was probably the other little filler that maybe I should add, is that with all of the things that have happened over the last 8 years, we'd say, when I exited those last organizations, what I ended up doing was, all along I had a license, a real estate license. So I opened up my own brokerage, but I decided that I didn't want to do residential. I was like, I just can't, right? So I did a commercial brokerage. And usually they say, again, pick your asset classes. But because I didn't want to limit myself, I wasn't sure what would be a good fit for me. I did it all. So I did industrial, I did retail, I did office, and I became an expert in restaurants. And so, as a result of that knowledge from all of those different asset classes, now, then it turns out when I started rolling my numbers for my investment, it ended up giving me because normally we would just hire a broker. I didn't have to deal with that part of our prior business.
Right.
Now I got to see that piece, icing on the cake, right? So, what I would suggest to ladies is, think about the asset classes that you're curious about. Think about the locations, because sometimes you should invest. As we say, you invest where you make money, you live where you want to live. It does not mean that your investments are going to be immediately in your neighborhood. So kind of pay attention to what's happening. Some obvious things. If you're in a community where you see an increase, for example, in urbanization, where there's beginning to be more and more apartments or condo type structures being built, well, then guess what? Those units are typically smaller. So who are they building those units for? Are those units for early beginners, college students, early career professionals who have not accumulated very much? Or are these units being designed for empty nesters who are downsizing? Aha, storage units then possibly will be of value in the immediate proximity to those properties, because chances are, if someone has downsized from a house, those little apartments don't offer the same level of storage capacity. So you may have some keepsakes that you want to keep, and you don't want to just sell them off because you're going through a downsize. Well, you need a storage unit someplace. All right, what else is a factor that I notice? Well, what I notice is there's an increase in people purchasing RVs. Another opportunity, RV parks, right? So what are the type of asset classes that begin to make sense based on the demographics? That's really what I looked at. That's what I usually look at when I think about what are the immediate needs. So I ask people, think about where you're driving around your community. What do you see? Go to the a planning commission within the city that you're interested in, or the city that you live in. Study and see what type of approvals are they granting within the community. What does the general plan say? When was the last time it was updated in terms of what they're hoping? Have they upzoned some lands, or are there some opportunities for properties to be upzoned? And you can buy those properties before that happens. So now you end up with a valuable bump, right? And also recognize that it's not necessary for you to try to be everything. Real estate development is very complex. I just had a couple ladies try to, tie up a property and just about lost their money because of their inexperience in understanding all of the pieces in that transaction. This is not something that you just go yourself.
Development is the master's class. Like I always say,
master's class.
start small, buy an existing cash flowing, rent paying property before you start thinking about building.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so that's what I say. And then definitely, people like myself, because I am doing that's what happens is you end up having folks who are interested in your content. And I still do offer training program. In fact, I'm about to offer a new CEO VIP bootcamp about capital. So my doctorate, I did a dissertation on venture capital for independent makers for that, but I previously ran the fund where we had all type of asset classes of businesses starting, and of course I've done a lot of that training over the last 30 plus years. So really helping entrepreneurs understand how to capitalize those ventures and how to properly structure those ventures for capital. So
Wow.
it's my conversation is always around what is it that you think that you want to do. Let's talk about the customers. And then what is the capacity necessary to serve those customers? And then I'll get us the capital.
Fabulous. So how do people get in touch with you? What's the best way?
So I would send them to info at drmoney, drmoney.live, live.
Info at drmoney.live.
Yes. Yes. And
Got
if
it.
they want to check out my first series of resorts, which I hope they will, you can go to 420 wellnessjamaica.com and get on the mailing list, because we will begin bookings are going to be available in the next few weeks. And we're doing a promotion for bookings that start in October.
So 420wellnessjamaica.com?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Dr. Steph, thank you so much for being available and sharing your story. You are a rock star. All of the things that a lawyer, you just happened to throw that in like 30 minutes in. Oh, and then I went to law school.
Well,
JD at the end of your name, but I was like, and when did she do that?
It was just, again, when I went into real estate development and every business that I've entered, I made a point of studying who the players are in the space and what their backgrounds are. And so that's kind of how I navigated my paths. And I looked at, most of the guys that do the deals that I like to do either have JDs or, they have significant finance backgrounds or kind of an engineering mindset, but really they are CPA. Or they're a JD. And I thought really for me, giving me across the board is using and having the opportunity to have the JD, because that's real. I'm a deal junkie. Yeah. I'm empowered to get and that's how I was structuring and underwriting these deals globally. It was so amazing. While I was in law school, I was over in London meeting with hedge. I was just around the world going, oh my gosh.
That's amazing. Well, reach out to my friend Tracy Prigmore. I think you all have a lot in common.
Oh, I would love that. I'll have to follow up with you for her contact detail.
Yeah. And she's on LinkedIn, Tracy Prigmore with She Has a Deal. So you'll be able to find her if you go to LinkedIn.
Okay, Prigmore.
Yeah, Prigmore. She Has a Deal.
Okay.
You'll love each other for sure. Well, thank you, Dr. Steph, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, and you too, and enjoy the birthday for your son, his 21st birthday. That's a significant milestone.
It is. Thank you. Have a great night.
All right. Bye.